The briefing chamber of Outpost Gamale 9 stank of ozone, sterilization mist, and interspecies dread. Vrixel adjusted his translator node with trembling fingers. The Karuan prided themselves on composure, but this was chaos bundled in uniforms. 16 sentients from 11 different species were crammed into semicircular seating. Their body temperatures varied wildly. The Glarn ambassador's thoracic sacs pulsed from stress. A Dumac shed its mucus layer for the third time in 20 minutes. And, somewhere near the center, kicking his boots up on the safety rail, sat Private Dan Mercer. Human, grinning. Again. Vrixel had studied humans extensively. The Interstellar Alliance had issued several revised protocols since humanity's induction. Never corner them. Do not challenge them to endurance tasks. Never, under any circumstance, allow them unsupervised access to caffeine. Vrixel had read them all, made flashcards, and requested psychological modeling simulations. He'd watched 23 hours of something called reality television, hoping to gain insight. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what he now faced. "Let's begin," Vrixel said, voice firm, despite the growing nausea curling in his abdomen sac. "This is a Class 4 survival orientation. You are expected to operate under primitive environmental conditions with limited equipment. This training could save your lives." He paused to let the gravity of the statement settle. On cue, the Glarn emitted a nervous chitter. Mercer cracked his knuckles. "I will now introduce you to the most lethal flora found in Sector 7 Phi. Each specimen has been replicated using biostasis containment fields. Do not touch them. Do not breathe near them. Do not, under any circumstances, taste them." Vrixel activated the display. A plant bloomed into view mid-air, a vivid red pod, blistered and oozing clear liquid. It looked angry. Even under containment, its radiated heat registered on the temperature sensors. "This," Vrixel said, "is the scorch pod. Trace contact may induce systemic organ failure within 20 Terran minutes. The toxin bypasses dermal filtration and attacks neural tissue. I cannot emphasize enough. Do not touch it." A hand shot up. Vrixel nearly sagged in relief. Perhaps, finally, a productive question. "Yes, Private Mercer? Is that the smoky kind or the spicy kind? My uncle grows these in his backyard." Silence snapped into the room like a vacuum breach. One of the Dumac made a noise that translated, loosely, as, "What?" Vrixel stared at him. "I do not understand your query." Mercer leaned forward, pointing casually at the scorch pod. "It's a chili, right? Looks like a ghost or maybe a Carolina Reaper. Real barn burners. We dry them, grind them, use them in stews. My uncle puts them in homemade jerky. Spicy stuff." "Your uncle cultivates scorch pods?" Mercer blinked. "Well, we don't call them that. Ours don't ooze like that, but they'll still put your mouth on fire. You get a good endorphin kick. Makes your eyes water. Best thing after a long ruck. Contact causes neural degradation." "Yeah, sounds about right," Mercer nodded. "Feels like your brain's melting for a minute, but it's part of the fun. Builds character." Vrixel's translator chirped and hesitated, as if unsure whether to classify Mercer's sentence as data or malfunction. The Karuan instructor inhaled deeply, centering himself. This had to be a misunderstanding. "Let us continue," he said, voice sharp. The next projection materialized, a pale, root-like mass with fine red tendrils curling outward like a sea creature. "This is deathroot. Its toxins crystallize in blood plasma. Untreated exposure results in total circulatory collapse. Fatal in under 1 hour." Mercer tilted his head. "That's parsnip. Or maybe horseradish?" "No," Vrixel said, through clenched throat folds. "It is deathroot." "Right, but that's just a name. I think we roast that with lamb back home. A little honey glaze, some rosemary, gets all crispy on the edges. Real nice." The Glarn ambassador made a noise like a clogged drain and slumped over. Vrixel reached for the emergency saline sprayer. "Medic." The Krevax nurse on duty, Drivlin darted over, attempting to revive the fainted ambassador with calibrated puffs of stimulant gas. Mercer leaned aside politely, still watching the plant projection. "Is there a smell to it?" Horseradish really clears the sinuses. My cousin put a dab in his nose once. Long story. No more stories, Vrixel hissed. This is a survival seminar, not a culinary exchange. Hard to separate the two, honestly, Mercer shrugged. A lot of our dangerous stuff ends up in the kitchen. You should see what we do with fermented fish. The Kryvax nurse looked up from the recovering ambassador. Instructor, permission to run a sanity diagnostic on the human? Denied, Vrixel snapped. Next plant. A new image spun into view. Bulbous white orbs with thin, twitching fibers that released a shrill, almost imperceptible sound. These are shrieker bulbs. Their release of sonic toxins can rupture eardrums and induce seizures. Even proximity exposure has been fatal in smaller species. Oh, Mercer grinned. Garlic. No. Mercer leaned back. I mean, not raw, but yeah, saute it in butter, put it on bread. That's peak comfort food. We even have garlic festivals. Festivals? Yeah, whole towns get together. Garlic hats, garlic ice cream. There's even a contest where people just eat cloves raw until someone passes out. Drivelin dropped his med scanner. By the time Vrixel reached the next entry, the leaf that induces paralysis, he was visibly shaking. This causes full-body paralysis. Even brushing against exposed skin will render you immobile. You will asphyxiate if not ventilated manually. Mercer squinted. Cilantro? I beg your pardon. Yeah, some people taste soap, but I like it. Pairs great with lime and grilled chicken. Vrixel paused. He looked at the leaf. He looked at Mercer. You consume the leaf that induces paralysis voluntarily? Depends on the taco. Drivelin lunged forward. Instructor, I'm going to sedate him. He's clearly delirious. Before Vrixel could protest, Mercer pulled something from his ration belt. Wait, let's settle this the scientific way. He bit into it. It was a raw scorch pod. Shrieks filled the chamber. The Glarn fainted again. Drivelin knocked over a hydration unit, lunging for the injector. Mercer's face turned red instantly. He coughed once, twice, tears welling. Okay, he choked. That's a spicy one. Wow. I think I saw a second sun for a second. Vrixel activated the toxicity scanner and pointed it directly at him. It beeped, jittered, and then displayed status: elevated heart rate, mild perspiration, enhanced endorphin levels, mood, euphoric. Then it blinked twice and powered down. Device malfunction, Vrixel muttered. Nope, Mercer wheezed, fanning his tongue. That's the human experience. Pain is flavor. Got any yogurt? Drivelin dropped the injector and sat down. Quietly. I will need to re-evaluate, Vrixel said numbly, already pulling up the curriculum interface. Mercer gave a thumbs up. Cool. I'll bring you some ghost pepper salsa next time. You'll love it. The debriefing room still reeked faintly of vaporized capsaicin. Vrixel had evacuated the training hall 22 minutes after Mercer's impromptu taste test. Not because of protocol, but because 3 of the other trainees had developed stress-induced rashes, and one of the Dumak began shedding its secondary dermis as a defense mechanism. Mercer remained unbothered, scribbling tasting notes on a napkin. Vrixel sat stiffly in his office now, the terminal's light casting a green hue over his facial ridges. He tapped through the curriculum files like a condemned Karun awaiting trial. He'd prepped so thoroughly, spent cycles designing neutral lighting to avoid species-specific visual distress, installed multilingual warnings in 12 dialects. Even ordered 2 non-toxic plant substitutes, just in case the humans displayed their rumored spontaneous ingestion reflexes. He had not, however, anticipated a human requesting yogurt after consuming a neurotoxic fruit. I should have included restraints, Vrixel murmured. His office door beeped. Occupied, Vrixel said flatly. It opened anyway. Dan Mercer strolled in, still chewing. Hey, you wanted a follow-up, right? I brought snacks. He tossed a foil pouch onto Vrixel's desk. Vrixel blinked. What is this? Trail mix. Don't worry, no capsaicin this time. Mostly legumes, salt, dehydrated fruit. Oh, and a few jalapeno-coated peanuts. Adds a kick. Peanuts are legumes? Vrixel asked, more out of shock than curiosity. Technically, yeah. Weird, right? Vrixel stared at the pouch like it might combust. Why would you flavor food with a known mucosal irritant? You flavor your culture's ceremonial broth with gravel dust and crushed lichen spores, Mercer replied, popping another peanut into his mouth. Which, by the way, tastes like carbonated dirt, but I didn't complain. That is a sacred digestive clarifier. Exactly, and for us, this is sacred sweat-inducing mouth fire. It's all about context. Vrixel opened a new document and titled it, Human Dietary Context, Urgent Revaluation. Outside, the training resumed with drills on terrain traversal, and Vrixel had no choice but to rejoin. As he stepped out, he noticed a small cluster of trainees eyeing Mercer warily, especially since the Glarn now physically recoiled at the sight of his lunch pouch. Let's continue, Vrixel announced, his voice a bit more brittle. Terrain awareness protocols begin now. But first, Tarug, come forward. A tall, slim Drunian stepped up, its bioluminescent skin flickering. You volunteered for specimen review, Vrixel said, gesturing toward a sealed chamber. Observe only, do not touch, this is not a test of bravery. Inside was the last specimen on the toxic plant list, a thorny fungus with blue-tinted spores. It resembled a tangled clump of wire wool, if the wire had been soaked in antifreeze. This is the cradle shroom. It produces hallucinogenic clouds that induce motor disassociation. Severe neurological symptoms may persist for weeks in non-native species. Looks like blue cheese, Mercer said from the back. The room turned in sync. Vrixel clutched the edge of his lectern. Pardon? Mercer held up a data slate. Yeah, see, this is Stilton, fermented dairy, same moldy texture, smells just as awful. You pair it with crackers or steak. Tarug emitted a low-frequency pulse of horror. I assure you, Vrixel said slowly, this fungus disables cerebellar function. Exposure has rendered some species unable to regulate temperature or blinking for days. Yeah, Mercer agreed. Try a good French cheese board, same deal. Before Vrixel could start muttering emergency directives to himself, Tarug took an involuntary step back and, without warning, slammed its cranial dome into the wall in what Vrixel could only interpret as an emotional reset. Tarug is excused, Vrixel said quickly. No penalties. Back outside, the group took a rest under a low-hanging boulder canopy. Mercer, unfazed, pulled out another snack pouch. This one emitted a sour, vinegary scent that made one of the Krivaks gag. What now? Vrixel asked, voice ragged. Salt and vinegar chips, Mercer said cheerfully. Want one? I would sooner bite an active plasma relay. Your loss. Another trainee Relin, a young Jonkai with shimmering teal plating, finally snapped. Why are you all like this? She demanded. Your species catalog reads like a chemical accident. You ferment things, scorch things, preserve things in acidic brine, inject smoke into flesh for flavor. Why? Mercer leaned back, thoughtful. Well, we had to make stuff edible. Early humans didn't have much choice. We were freezing or starving most of the time. Rotting food? Try salting it. Too tough? Cook it. No fridge? Smother it in vinegar? We turned survival into cuisine. I guess that's kind of our thing. Relin blinked both sets of eyelids. So you survive by enhancing your suffering? Pretty much. Drivlin the medic finally muttered, We are dealing with culinary masochists. Vrixel rubbed his face and checked the time markers. There were still 2 full sessions left. He wasn't going to make it. All right, he said. New segment. We will now conduct controlled exposure experiments, with caution. I repeat, caution. A murmur of worry rippled through the group. Except for Mercer, who perked up like he'd been offered dessert. Each trainee was handed a sample scanner and led to the botany table. Their task was simple. Analyze trace chemical signatures, compare toxicity indices, and identify threats based on species-specific data. Predictably, Mercer went off script immediately. Ooh, are these raw shrieker bulbs again? He asked, pointing at a dish Vrixel knew had only been meant for scanning. Do not ingest anything on this table, Vrixel warned. Not even this one? Mercer picked up a curled white bulb. Smells like elephant garlic. I bet this roasts great. You are not to bet anything, Vrixel snapped. I'll just sniff it. You may not. Too late, Mercer said, sniffing. Huh. Strong but nice. Kind of floral. Suddenly, Relin turned to him, eyes narrowed. You said earlier cilantro tastes like soap to some humans? I need clarification. Is that a genetic flaw? Mercer shrugged. Not a flaw. It's just a variant in how people process aldehydes. Some folks taste citrus. Others? Hand soap. Impossible, she said. Taste cannot differ based on DNA. It absolutely can. It's why my cousin thinks asparagus tastes like sadness. Now, the Glarn ambassador, finally regaining consciousness under a shaded recovery tent, let out a long moan. Vrixel had stopped documenting. He was now writing a resignation letter he might not send. By the end of the session, chaos had devolved into oddly civil food diplomacy. Mercer offered his unopened MRE to the group. Drevlin refused. Relin took a bite and immediately requested a neuroblocker. The Dumak stared at a granola bar as if it were an act of war. And one of the Jankai dared lick a peanut. The reaction was instantaneous. He screamed, fell backwards, and demanded a saline flush while shouting, "My lips are melting." They weren't, of course, but Vrixel didn't blame him for believing it. Later, back in his quarters, Vrixel uploaded the revised toxic flora file. He opened the reclassification panel and, with the kind of clinical detachment only trauma could provide, created a new category. Edible to humans, for unknown and deeply concerning reasons. He logged the changes with annotations. Scorch pod, reclassified. Effects on humans include temporary euphoria, perspiration, and self-imposed agony. Potentially addictive. Consider cultural implications. He added subnotes for deathroot, shrieker bulbs, and the leaf that induces paralysis, with cilantro variant included. He didn't know what to do about the cradle shroom, so he marked it with pending. Resembles cheese. More research required. Finally, he submitted a formal request to the Galactic Food Safety Commission. Initiate audit of all known Terran food products. Begin with buffalo wings. End with wasabi. Include cross-reference for phrases such as hurts so good and pain is flavor. Consider invoking emergency culinary treaty. Then, for good measure, he added a new footnote to the orientation manual. Warning: do not attempt to eat or imitate human food behavior. They are evolutionary outliers. Consult a xenonutritionist first. He sat back, exhaled, and from the adjacent corridor, Mercer's voice called out. Hey, Instructor, you ever tried hot sauce on rehydrated rations? Really spices things up. Vrixel screamed into a pillow. The next morning, Vrixel received an official message stamped with a high-priority Interstellar Alliance seal. He opened it with dread already souring in his glands. 2. Instructor Vrixel, Karun, Survival Corps. Subject: Unexpected Nutritional Resilience Human Exception Clause. Based on your submitted report regarding Terran ingestion of Class 4 toxic flora, the Alliance Medical Council requests a full, supervised demonstration of interspecies comparative taste response. Effective immediately, your training session has been reclassified as a Level 2X Nutritional Adaptation Observation. All further data to be shared with xenonutrition research sectors. A culinary liaison will arrive within 2 days. Proceed with caution. Vrixel slumped over his desk. His eye membranes twitched involuntarily. This wasn't a demotion, it was worse. He was now part of a food study. Down in the camp's mess zone, Mercer was sharing breakfast, some strange flatbread topped with something orange and sticky, which he insisted was real peach jam, not that artificial stuff. The Jankai still refused to sit closer than 3 meters. I'm sorry, Relin muttered, but the fact that your species processes rotting fruit until it becomes gelatinous and then eats it for breakfast has broken something inside me. It's not rotting, it's preserved, Mercer replied, cheerfully unfazed. You'd love marmalade. It's like sweet citrus punishment. Again, Vrixel interjected, arriving with a datapad. This is a survival course, not a flavor safari. Mercer wiped jam from his fingers. Just trying to help the team acclimate. It's bonding through breakfast. Vrixel held up the datapad. By order of the Alliance, I am now obligated to conduct comparative ingestion testing. Silence fell. A Krivax immediately set down their drink. A Dumak pulled their scarf higher over their photosensitive spiracles. "You're feeding us poison?" Relin asked, with what sounded suspiciously like restrained excitement. "No, you will observe," Vrixel said. "The human will demonstrate. You will scan. That is all. No ingestion is permitted unless cleared by the on-site medic and at least 2 biosensors." Drivelin, still visibly shaken from yesterday's peanut incident, coughed nervously. "Should I prep containment kits?" "Yes," Vrixel muttered, "and flavor neutralizers, if we even have such things." Within the hour, a makeshift observation station was constructed in the dry ravine next to the main camp. Vrixel had hoped to present this with some dignity, but between the haphazard bioshields and a stack of unapproved Terran condiments, Mercer had apparently smuggled in, including extra hot mustard and ranch. It looked more like an open-air street market gone terribly wrong. "First test, scorch pod," Vrixel began, holding up a freshly replicated specimen with tongs. Instructed sample, minimal, controlled bite. Mercer took the pod, examined it. "So, we're doing hot stuff first? Great. I skipped breakfast for this." He bit into it. The effect was immediate. He coughed, eyes watering, face reddening to the point Drivelin activated a preliminary triage scan, but Mercer waved him off, muttering, "That's a 4 out of 10, we're still in the baby zone." A Glarn observer fainted. Again. The scanner chimed. Status: internal temperature up 1.8 degrees. Minor perspiration, endorphin spike. Mood: elevated. Internal alert. Pleasure response linked to nociceptor stimulation. Vrixel reread it 3 times. "You're experiencing pleasure from this reaction?" "Well, yeah," Mercer rasped. "That's the point. The burn resets your brain a little. It's like screaming, but for your mouth." Relin took a cautious step forward. "I'm confused. You willingly consume something that mimics a threat response. Why?" "Because it's a controlled threat. You know it won't kill you. And afterward, you feel great. Endorphins are weird like that. It's therapeutic." "Therapy," Vrixel repeated hollowly. Next, Mercer held up a bulb of deathroot. "We roasting this, or—" "Raw only," Vrixel said. "Per Alliance rules. If you begin convulsing, raise your hand." Mercer bit into it, chewed thoughtfully. "Tangy, little earthy, definitely not horseradish. Maybe closer to daikon?" Relin turned to Drivelin. "How is he not dying?" "I am uncertain," the medic replied. "His circulatory markers show activity, but not degeneration. If anything, he's metabolizing the compounds." "Can we not do this with garlic next?" muttered the Dumak, who was already covering their olfactory folds. They moved down the line. One by one, Mercer sampled each of the Class 4 toxins, with varying expressions of delight, contemplation, or casual critique. Shrieker bulbs brought a cough and a thumbs up. The paralysis-inducing leaf was turned into an impromptu taco topping, much to Vrixel's horror. The most dramatic moment came with the cradle shroom. Mercer stared at it, cocked his head. "This smells awful, like blue cheese and a gym sock had a baby." Vrixel shuddered. "But," Mercer continued, "that usually means it's got character." "No," Vrixel said. "It means danger." But Mercer had already nibbled it. He paused, stared into the distance, then exhaled. "Okay, that was a mistake." The entire team lunged into motion. Drivelin rushed forward with a scanner. "Symptoms?" "No pain, just, the flavor is like someone condensed regret into a sponge." "You're hallucinating?" "No, but I am questioning my life choices." The scanner, once again, gave its verdict. Cognitive function, stable. Emotional response, reflective. Taste receptors engaged in disgust loop. Neurological threat, negative. Vrixel sat down, on the ground, in the dirt. This is worse than adaptation. This is weaponized nonsense. Later that evening, the trainees gathered for debrief. Despite the traumatic afternoon, there was an odd sense of camaraderie forming united less by understanding and more by the shared experience of not understanding. "Cilantro," Relin declared. still tastes like cleansing fluid. Only if your olfactory receptor proteins bind the aldehydes incorrectly, Mercer replied, around a spoonful of some rehydrated chili he'd concocted with all the toxic ingredients from earlier. No offense, said the Duomac, but I hope your stomach lining is double reinforced. Actually, it's just really stubborn. Vrixel sat nearby, writing with stiff fingers. He was updating the official Karuan training manual. Again. Section 9A. Ingestion Protocols. Subsection, Human Dietary Exemptions. Scorch pod, reclassified for human use. Causes distress, interpreted as enjoyment. Death route, inconclusive. Recommend observation, no intervention unless seizure occurs. Shrieker bulbs, similar to earth, garlic. Proceed with disbelief. Paralysis leaf, considered cilantro. Controversial even among humans. Cradle shroom. Flavor evokes spiritual regret, but not fatal. He added a final clause. Note, if confronted with a human offering food, politely decline unless medically supervised. Cultural offense is preferable to digestive obliteration. As the group settled in for rest, Mercer wandered over and offered Vrixel a small package. What is it now? Vrixel asked warily. Buffalo jerky. Not actual buffalo, just the flavor name. You mentioned wings earlier. This is the dehydrated version. I refuse. Fair? Mercer sat beside him, quiet for a beat. You think I'm reckless, he said, not accusatory. I think your species has redefined the word. Mercer chuckled. You're probably right, but I'll tell you something. All those plants back there, the ones that could have killed us, we learned how to eat them because we had to. That's what humans do. We don't always win, but we try things, a lot of dumb things, and somehow, some of them turn out great. Vrixel closed his notes, stared into the strange alien stars above. You realize you may have triggered a new field of xeno-gastrointestinal research? Mercer grinned. Glad to help. Want to be on the naming committee? We can call it Vrixel's Digestive Gambit. I will personally request that designation be banned. Suit yourself. A silence settled in surprisingly peaceful, even with a faint whiff of chili oil in the air. By the fourth day of training, Vrixel's mandible ridge had stopped twitching every time Mercer reached for his ration belt. It wasn't acceptance, it was resignation. The human had, against all reason and biochemical data, survived a week of close contact with flora classified by the Karuan Defense Bureau as field sterilization grade. Not only survived, he'd rated them. Today's scheduled lesson was supposed to focus on hydration acquisition through dew condensation. A simple, quiet module, peaceful, involving leaves, patience, and the kind of silence Vrixel had once dreamed of before Mercer turned his wilderness orientation into a cross-cultural cookout. The plan was scrapped the moment a shuttle landed on the training ridge, dust scattering across the ravine in wide bursts. A pale violet banner shimmered on its side. Galactic Culinary Council, Liaison Inspection Unit. No, Vrixel whispered to himself. Yes, Mercer whispered behind him, eyes gleaming. The hatch hissed open, and out stepped an ambassadorial unit in full regulation attire, cobalt aprons over armored bio-suits. At their lead stood an unusually short Makari with 3 optical stalks, each swiveling independently. A crate labeled Evaluation Kit Terrestrial Case Study 44C floated behind him on a magnetic dolly. Which of you is the ingestive anomaly? The liaison asked in a lilting voice. Mercer stepped forward and offered a bag of chips. Depends. You into vinegar? We are not here to snack, the liaison snapped, recoiling from the bag as if it were radioactive. We are here to document, understand, and, if necessary, contain. Do you understand that the Interstellar Health Code lists your food preparation techniques under experimental threat categories? Mercer seemed unfazed. What's the scale? Like, are we above or below raw fish fermented underground? Below, just barely. The trainees, now very much awake and partially gathered in a semicircle, began to mutter among themselves. Vrixel stepped forward. I submitted a formal classification review, he said, hoping to maintain some authority. It was not intended to become a diplomatic incident. Too late, the Makari said, already pulling vials from the crate. We've received reports of symptomless ingestion of Class 4 and 5 flora, plus emotional reactions inconsistent with known toxicology data. We must now conduct a taste audit and palatability stress test under Article 19 of the Culinary Integrity Charter. Mercer raised a hand. Quick question, what's a palatability stress test? The Macari held up a silver capsule. You will eat this. We will observe what happens. That's the test. Mercer frowned. And what is it? A synthesized fusion of 3 Class 4 plant types: scorch pod oil, deathroot extract, and fermented shrieker bulb base. It is not food. It is a biochemical constant used to calibrate species-specific digestive pain thresholds. You want me to eat it? Mercer asked. Correct. This will, ideally, incapacitate you. If it does not, we will revisit your classification. I'm game if you've got some yogurt nearby. You will have water, if you survive. Hard mode, got it. The gathered trainees murmured again. Raylan made a noise like a kettle boiling. The Dumac began muttering funeral preparations. Drevlin quietly prepped a medbay cot and emergency sedatives. Mercer held the capsule for a moment, turning it over in his hand. Then, with a shrug, he popped it into his mouth. For a solid 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then he sat down. Not collapsed, just folded himself onto the ground like someone absorbing news. Drevlin rushed forward with a scanner, already chirping. Heart rate elevated, he muttered. Skin flushing, mild tremors, endorphin levels rising. Mercer was blinking rapidly. Wow, that tastes like betrayal and regret had a baby raised by fire. The Macari leaned closer. Do you require a trauma blanket? Do you have milk? Mercer croaked. No. Then, I guess we're leaning in. Drevlin made a worried noise. I can administer a gut stabilizer. No, Mercer wheezed. Let it pass through the cycle. I've started the journey. Why do you persist in liking this? The Macari demanded. I don't like it, Mercer said, his eyes tearing. I respect it. The Macari turned to Vrixel. This is not normal. Vrixel, exhausted beyond formality, simply said, I know. Mercer raised a shaky finger. Okay. Verdict. Heat index a 10, pain a 12. Flavor? Surprisingly complex. Needs salt. Final rating, 3.5 stars. Silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, the Glarn ambassador, still half dazed from his prior fainting spells, rolled onto his side and muttered, He gave it stars. By midday, word had spread through the outer colonies. The human digestive system was trending on Alliance message boards. Memes began circulating, one with Mercer riding a flaming scorch pod like a bronco. Vrixel had to disable his terminal's public comment alerts. The Macari liaison finally approached him again, shaking all 3 of his eye stalks simultaneously. We've concluded our audit. Terran ingestive behavior cannot be categorized under known food safety protocols. You were correct to request re-evaluation. Is he still considered a threat? The Macari paused. Not a threat, an anomaly, an edible paradox. He handed Vrixel a small certificate. Certification of Exception. Terran Digestive Clause. 74. B. Adaptive Culinary Endurance. Issued to Dan Mercer. Status. Non-reproducible biological outlier. Suggested classification. Cautionary curiosity. Avoid imitating unless under xenonutrition supervision. Vrixel stared at it. It had a gold seal and everything. The trainees gathered again that evening for what should have been the closing review. Instead, Mercer was at the center of a growing circle, explaining how to make hot sauce from scratch using sterilized field rations and a few cleverly bartered shriek bulb extracts. Drevlin actually sampled it. 1 drop. He turned pale and had to sit down. I can't feel my tongue, he said. Because it's working, Mercer said proudly. The Dumac muttered, We're all going to die. The Glarn, now oddly fascinated instead of terrified, sat cross-legged beside Mercer. Can you explain again why pain equals flavor? It doesn't always, Mercer replied, just when it's worth it. Later that night, long after the fire dimmed and the training tents quieted, Vrixel updated his final report. Outcome: Human physiology continues to defy nutritional logic. Cultural attitude toward food remains baffling. Final recommendation: maintain distance from Terran food events. Encourage respectful observation. Never accept anything labeled extra spicy. Discontinue use of the term toxic in shared training when referencing human edible flora. Replace with potentially edible to humans, hazardous to everyone else. He closed the file. Then, after a long pause, pulled out the small tin Mercer had given him earlier in the day. It had a handwritten label. Mild salsa, for beginners, good with bread. Vrixel opened it, sniffed cautiously. Spicy, fruity, sharp. He dabbed the tiniest trace on his tongue. A wave of sensation hit him: heat, yes, but also something else. Depth. A chemical thrill, not pleasant, but not bad. He sat quietly for a few minutes, letting it settle. Then whispered, "I may never understand you people." From the nearby tent, Mercer's sleepy voice drifted out. "But you tasted it, didn't you?" Vrixel didn't answer. But he didn't throw it away either.